made will have the same validity as those made at a meeting held at City Hall. So that gives us the legitimacy, as it were, to make decisions at tonight's meeting. A recording of this meeting will appear on the Council's YouTube channel. Can I ask participants to ensure that they are muted when not speaking, or you may be muted by an officer to maintain audio quality. The chat function is to enabled for members to report technical difficulties, but you will only be able to message the chair, vice chair, and democratic services. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now, are we in a position to invite in and say hello to members of the general public who have decided to join us for this evening?
Yeah, yes, we can now. Yes, it's now going live.
Okay, and I've just lost my screen. Hang on. There we are. Good. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting. Can I, in particular, welcome Councillor Sergeant Bergelin, who is the new leader of the main opposition party, the Green Group. Welcome to the Cabinet meeting, Sandra. Nice to see you. We hope members of the public enjoy and find value from this evening's meeting. This is our first Cabinet Zoom meeting. So I'm now going to begin the formal agenda. So first of all, I'm going to take any apologies. Do we have any apologies, Lucy? No apologies? Okay, thank you. I now need to take declarations of interest. I believe there are 3 of those. Councillor Stonard, would you like to? That's it.
Thank you. Yes, I was just unmuting. So I'd like to declare a pecuniary interest in item 8 on the agenda, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other?
Yes, I'd like to declare an interest on item 8.
Item 8, thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Alan. In the interest of transparency, item 7 within it, the Broads Authority are mentioned on several occasions. I will become a member of the Broads Authority on the 17th of June, so I'd like to declare an other interest at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So just to be clear, in the cases of Councillor Stonard and Kendrick, when item 8 is presented, they will, as it were, leave the room, mute their microphones and turn off their videos for this item. In the case of Councillor Harris, she may remain in the room and also vote. Okay, do we have any public questions or petitions, Lucy?
No.
We don't, okay. We have minutes from our last meeting, which seems like a different age. Are there any, is this a true record, or are there any amendments? Gail.
Thank you, Alan. Just a small amendment to the minutes. There's a typo on page 12, paragraph 13. The last sentence should read decorate on their behalf, and we've got declare on their behalf.
Okay, so can we do that correction? Are there any other amendments to the minutes? So with that correction, can I sign them as a true record? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's now move on. So the first item on the agenda is item 5, and that's the COVID-19 Council's response and blueprint for recovery. It is the report of the Chief Executive Officer, Stephen Evans. For a little bit of context, it was discussed thoroughly at Scrutiny Committee this morning, and Councillor James Wright, who chairs Scrutiny Committee, chaired that meeting, and will at some point in the discussion of this agenda this item, be bringing up some recommendations from this morning's scrutiny committee. The way this is going to work is I'm going to introduce it. There is in the report as essentially political introduction by myself as leader of the council. I'm then going to ask the chief executive to go through the salient points outlined in the executive summary, and we will then take any comments or observations following those two introductory sets of remarks. So starting with myself, the thing about the experience we're going through is we've all been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And what this report does is it describes how the City Council has responded to that crisis, how it's adapted its services to meet the priorities of a city in quarantine, and in particular, support its most vulnerable residents. It is not just a story about the city, it is about the wide network of partnerships across Norwich, stretching into the county. There's a lot of work going on with the county council, other district councils, resilience boards, and regular contact with government ministers and government departments. And the whole purpose has been to limit the impact and the spread of the virus, and the capacity that has been increased by hundreds of volunteers that have given time freely to support their fellow citizens. I would add that elected members of this council of all political groups have played an active part in their wards, as well as supporting voluntary groups and also carrying out their responsibilities in terms of making decisions to enable us to protect our citizens and residents in the best way we can. And I have to thank everybody in Norwich for the work that they've done, the self-discipline really of enduring, in many cases, a long period of lockdown so that the virus is contained. And that is one of the reasons why Norwich has seen one of the lowest death rates in the United Kingdom. But it hasn't gone away. We are going to live with COVID-19 for the foreseeable future. But bearing that in mind and the salience of the public health issues, we are nonetheless having to think about how Norwich will have been changed by this experience, and that's a question being asked around the country. But what we have in place in Norwich, and we have a framework at Norwich 2040 involving the widest range of residents, businesses, public and private institutions, community groups, in terms of how we move this forward. And in that context, we've already tested the views of many of those partners as to whether the overarching ambitions that we have for the city going forward are ones which are still relevant. I can say that the view is that those priorities remain in place, but how we deliver them, what factors come into play as a result of the COVID virus, and what happens subsequently clearly means that we need to think afresh in a number of ways. In a historical context, I would say that this particular pandemic, the first in 100 years that's been experienced since the Spanish flu at the end of the First World War, has been a significant event. So we could compare it, for example, with the experience of the Second World War insofar as people looked back to 1939, recognised that actually significant things had happened and that things would have to change. You couldn't go back. And that sees a period after the war where new institutions are built, a welfare state, including a national health service, massive house building programmes, commitments to new types of public ownership, and full employment. And local government was a key partner in building those institutions. And I have to say, in economic terms, we had a period of unprecedented growth in living standards over the next 30 to 40 years. Closer to our own time has been the global financial crisis at the end of the first decade of the 21st century. Now, the response to that crisis has been somewhat different. The role of local government was to bear the burdens of significant cuts in public expenditure, a period of retrenchment and austerity, which has rolled forward for 10 years. And I think we have seen the impact of that reflected in the ability to respond to the pandemic. So here we are. Government has been extraordinarily grateful for obviously the National Health Service, social care sector, but also local government, which has been a key partner in delivering resources to people, support for people, and providing an infrastructure to enable us to get through this with a degree of resilience. So are these just temporary measures, the role that government has introduced in terms of making sure that businesses survive, that people are not going to be thrown out of work? And it's appreciated that nearly £400 billion has been put into making sure that we get those stabilisers in place. Now, is this a temporary thing, or is it indications of a more positive direction? So I think there is an opportunity here to try and get that positive direction, to learn the lessons of COVID, to learn where there have been strengths but also weaknesses in our institution. But what I am clear about is that a strong local government is absolutely vital going forward. And what this report does is it describes what one particular council, in partnership with other councils and other institutions and the people of the city, has done to steer us through the intense impact of this first wave of pandemic. We hope there's not a second, but also then to think about what we do to help the city economy, to help people recover from this critical period in our history. And that is the purpose of this report. And I'm very grateful to Stephen and his colleagues for the work that's been done on this to bring to Cabinet today. So Stephen, can I ask you to give us the salient point from the executive summary?
Thank you, Leader. The report covers three main areas: the impact of COVID on Norwich, the council's response, the main elements of the council's response, and the priorities, proposed priorities for the future as we look towards recovery. So together, the document comes together to form an intended blueprint for recovery, to frame the decisions and priorities of the council over the next 12 to 18 months. It's important to emphasise that it's intended to be a live document and that it will continue to evolve as things progress. I'll say a little bit about some of the main points within the document, but in terms of next steps, we will continue to consult with partners throughout the recovery process. We've started that already. We had a very productive meeting with City Vision partners 2 weeks ago. And we'll also be consulting with wider residents and businesses through the council's channels that it has available. We're intending to develop a more detailed action plan under each theme of the blueprint. This will bring together the actions set out in the current document and also others which will emerge over the coming weeks and months. And I also expect us to bring forward more detailed strategies and policies to Cabinet and to other committees relating to these themes as things progress. So when we talk about harnessing social capital, I'd envisage us bringing forward a community participation strategy that sets out what we mean by that and how we're going to deliver that in practice. As the report sets out, we're developing a dashboard of measures across a range of social and economic indicators to ensure that we are tracking progress, and we'll scrutinise that through CLT and through Cabinet alongside our wider corporate plan measures. it's really important to recognise that in terms of delivery and in terms of kind of seeing the city through recovery, we can't do this alone. The council is a convener of partners across the city, and we'll all have to work together with residents, with businesses, with other parts of the public sector, the private sector, and with voluntary community sectors to come together to see recovery through. There's a section in the report that proposes using the already strong City Vision partnership to oversee and steer the recovery, and also to use the Good Economy Commission to particularly focus on the local economy. And we'd expect to see other forums to be developed that oversees certain elements of the plan. So briefly, just in terms of the 3 areas of the report, in terms of the impact of COVID on Norfolk and on Norwich, the number of cases and the death rates in Norfolk and Norwich have been relatively low compared to other parts of the country, and reports have shown that Norwich has got the 3rd lowest death rate from COVID in the country. That I think is due to a number of reasons. Geography will play a part. I think the demographics of the city, which is quite different from other parts of Norfolk, will also play a part. But I also think that the behaviour of our residents and how they've adhered to the guidelines and adhered to social distancing and staying at home, particularly as we were kind of coming up to the peak, has really played a part in this. And also the excellent work of the NHS, emergency services, other council colleagues, volunteers, community groups, who have all performed magnificently over the last 3 months. And I wanted to place on record my thanks to everyone who's got involved. As we look towards recovery, we've got a kind of clear overarching objective, and that is to protect health and avoid a second peak. Just focusing on a couple of elements of our response. Throughout this, we've really focused on trying to keep vital local services going and supporting vulnerable people as much as possible. The organisation has been challenged, but I think we've held up well under significant pressure. Our community response hub, which was set up over the course of a week, was really set up to support those vulnerable residents, those people who were shielded or who had other conditions which made them particularly vulnerable to the virus. Through the response hub, we've made to date over 6,000 calls to the most vulnerable in the city to assess their needs. And in many cases, they aren't just one-off calls, they are ongoing welfare calls to continue to check in with people. We've delivered 600 emergency food parcels and nearly 500 medicine drops. Our revenue and benefits team has so far paid out 36.7 million in grants to small businesses. That's nearly 3,000 grants, which is the best performance in Norfolk in terms of the percentage of money that's been distributed, and within the top 40 local authorities nationally out of 300 authorities. And then this week we've also launched a discretionary grants fund, which is open to those businesses which weren't eligible through the first round of funding. The council also took a decision early on to use the hardship money that was given to local authorities by government to reduce council tax bills to zero to those in receipt of council tax benefit, and that will be a real financial benefit to 4,000 people across the city, those who are facing significant financial hardship. The work on homelessness and rough sleepers has also been significant. Like other parts of the country, Norwich has seen an increase in demand for temporary accommodation, and we have responded as a council through our housing options team, but also through our pathways programs to ensure that everyone who has been sleeping rough was offered accommodation, and that the vital wraparound support through the partnership was there, including food, physical and mental health support, and drugs and alcohol treatment, dealing with people with some really complex issues. Just looking ahead to recovery, the recovery part of the document really focuses on a couple of things. First of all, it looks at what does recovery look like for the organisation. And I think what we've seen is that in a very kind of short time period, the council has had to change how it works and how it delivers services. The majority of staff are now working from home, and we know that that's going to have to continue for the foreseeable future as social distancing continues. But actually, I see an opportunity here for the council and an opportunity for staff going forward to give staff the opportunity, should they choose to continue to work flexibly, to work from home, and to hopefully change the culture and give people a better work-life balance. I also want to embed the learning that we've come to through this process. We've shown that we can change at pace. We've shown that we can deliver services differently, and the report talks about opportunities there about how we apply that to other services across the council, and we reimagine how services are delivered to respond to the changing behaviours of our residents. Supporting the vulnerable is a key theme for our recovery. And in terms of homelessness, that's about moving people into sustainable accommodation, which we are doing already. And as I say, ensuring that wraparound support is there in the short to medium term, but working with other colleagues, with county colleagues around social care, public health, drugs and alcohol treatment, through our Pathways partnership, but also with the wider voluntary community sector and specialist providers, to look at over the longer term, to look at pathways out of poverty for some of the most vulnerable in the city, skills, training opportunities, moving closer to the labour market. We're currently doing a lot of work with county colleagues, with the bid and with retailers to ensure that we're putting in place measures to encourage social distancing in the city as it does begin to open up again. And the report sets out some of those measures. And we also want to be promoting sustainable transport, such as walking and cycling, as the city does begin to open up again. Over the longer term, a key strand of the recovery will be around housing development and regeneration, developing a pipeline of brownfield sites for future development, and also a couple of specific sites of which there are separate reports to Cabinet tonight around the redevelopment of Mile Cross, and also potentially the biggest regeneration opportunity in the east of England at the Carrow Works, former Carrow Works site in East Norwich, which has potential to develop 4,000 homes over the longer term. Finally, I do need to talk a little bit about the impact that COVID has had on the council's finances, which is documented in the report. We have seen that every council across the country has been severely financially impacted. A number of councils have come out, more councils have come out today saying that they are close to issuing Section 114 notices. I think Norwich has dealt with its finances really well over the last decade, but we have been impacted. We will continue to lobby government to ensure that they put more money into the sector to not only compensate for the increased expenditure, but also to compensate for the lost income. Councils have had to diversify their income streams as a result of reduced funding from central government. And we need to continue to make the case. But we also need to recognise that actually, until the money comes through, there is a risk that government won't give us more money, which means we have to lobby for the best, argue for the best, and plan for the worst. And the document does set out some proposals we are taking forward, and we are looking at the moment to look at in-year savings. As we do that, as far as possible, we want to avoid cuts to frontline services. But this is an active piece of work that we are taking forward. It is going to be a challenge, and we'll continue to press government to put more money in to support local services. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to ask, first of all, any Cabinet members who would like to make any observations at this point. Karen, and then Beth, and then Kevin to start with, and then Gail. Karen?
Thank you, Alan. Yeah, I want to thank Stephen and the officers for turning this report around very quickly in obviously a very busy time for the council. I obviously want to talk about the impact the community has had of working together. It's been really fantastic, and I'm really pleased that there is a piece in the report about harnessing that good work and continuing to work well with community groups in the future. The other thing I have concerns about is moving forward. The government have obviously said that children will not be fed in the school holidays. We are going to have a lot of children who need help and support, which we will need to work with county and individual schools and academies on to make sure that no child falls through the net in the holidays. We will be looking at possibly a second wave of unemployment as the furlough scheme drops further. So I think this is a really great platform to move ahead on, but I think we've still got a long way to go. And I think this is only, unfortunately, the beginning of poverty for a lot of people in the city. But I think it's a fantastic report, and I commend it. So thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Beth?
Just initially to echo Karen's words, an excellent report, and really pleased to see the mention of the private rented sector in there, because I think it's quite easily forgotten. And whilst there is the extension to the period that people can't be evicted now, it's a sticking plaster, and I'm really proud that we're already doing work around that to see how we can help residents. You know, we've got over 20% of our residents living in the private rented sector. So I think that's going to be a massive piece of work moving forward for us, and really glad that we've already started on it.
Thanks, Beth. Kevin?
Yeah, also, I think I have to add thanks to our officers. Comprehensive, well-researched, such an all-encompassing piece. But I want to sort of say a little bit about the environment, because it is a live document, but it already shows how we don't keep environmental issues in a silo. Just about every part of the report and what we're going to do has implications and considers how our environmental policies work through. And also looking forward, not only are we redoubling our efforts, but looking for opportunities to further and quicken that journey that we're making along the carbon, towards the carbon neutral end that we're looking for. So from an environmental point of view, it's a great report. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Gail?
Well, thank you for such a good presentation, Alan, and to Stephen and to all the staff who pulled this together for us. I'm actually really proud to be part of a forward-looking council which has risen to the challenge of COVID-19. And, you know, the whole paper proves that we're not a council who works in isolation. You know, we're working with residents, with volunteers, businesses. You know, we are partnership working is key to everything that we do. So, you know, I just want to thank all of the staff and, of course, the National Health Service, who's done some tremendous work. But, you know, there's so many people pulling together in this city. And we've been asked to endorse the framework and blueprint for the city. And I think that shows real leadership. And, you know, compared to with what central government is, the messages which are disjointed and muddled coming out from central government, this is a really clear and working document. So I think, you know, really, really good. We know that the lives of our residents have been turned upside down. And, you know, the staff have really risen to the challenge of providing sort of much needed services in a completely different way, in a very tight time scale. And they've done especially well for the most vulnerable in our city. So, but we know there's a lot to do. Stephen touched on the budget, and I'd have to say, you know, that we've taken a beating with this one. The Tory government failed to deliver on its initial promise of spend what you need and we'll make it right. They moved to the narrative of us all having to share the burden, which is very lovely, I'm sure. But, you know, it puts us in a very, very difficult position monetary wise. But from this paper, there are some real opportunities to move forward. The scrutiny committee has already raised some really good points, and we can modernise how the council works for the benefits of both residents and our staff. We've been really flexible in the last few months, and customer services have played a really key role in that. So there's a lot of good work that we can build on, but we mustn't forget the good work. We must build on it. I think within my portfolio, there are certainly challenges with the HRA, and I am concerned about rent arrears, because these are difficult times for people, but we do need people to engage with us so that we can talk things through. We are reintroducing our housing repair and maintenance service, because we've just been on emergency repairs for the last few months. We're reintroducing the letting service. There is so much to do, but, you know, from my point of view, I think that I know we can all pull together, and I know we will pull together. And I think, you know, let's treat this as an opportunity as well as a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gail. Are there any other Cabinet members? Mike?
Thank you, Alan. I want to echo what others have said in thanking the officers for an excellent document, a very thorough document. And I also want to say that I've been impressed by the flexibility of our staff throughout the organisation in, well, first of all, those who have been working from home and willingly doing that and finding new ways to work, but also those who've transferred to other frontline duties in order to support our policies and our residents. And I think we need to make it clear that we really appreciate what our staff have done, what our officers have done. The one thing I just wanted to say is there are many, many negatives, and we know that there are many, many negatives for local people as a consequence of the pandemic. But in the way that we've had to respond, there have been some positives. So more flexible working, more working from home, for example, people using IT to do things which 6 months ago they'd have said, oh, well, that's impossible. You couldn't possibly do that. You couldn't possibly have a cabinet meeting by Zoom, for example. And yet here we are. And there are many examples of that. What that means is that there's less traveling and there's actually less pollution, less private car usage, and also we've seen more walking and cycling. And I think this is an opportunity to grasp that change and try and, as we go forward, make sure that we don't revert. So I think there are some things that have been really good that have come out of this terrible time, which have pushed public behaviour and public attitudes and in a positive direction, and we shouldn't be trying to lose that. And I think that's reflected in the plan. So that's really what I wanted to say.
Thanks very much, Mike. Matt Packer.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo what's been said already, particularly thanks to the officers for all their hard work and dedication in very trying and difficult circumstances. And I also wanted to thank the residents of Norwich for how they've come together, whether it's the community involvement, volunteering they're doing. And I think from my portfolio, just seeing how well people have used the parks and open spaces in a responsible manner, adhering to the social distancing, has been very heartening. So just a thanks from me.
Thanks very much, Matt. Okay, that's all the Cabinet members, I think. Paul, did you want to add anything? This is unmuting. Okay, let me go on to Sandra. Before I bring in James with the feedback from Scrutiny Committee, was there anything that you'd like to say, Sandra?
Thank you, Ellen. Yes. I've got to first say that it's really encouraging to see how the Council has managed to formulate a vision for recovery in such a short time. And for us, it's really helpful to see all the main themes clearly listed and discussed. And I think we're quite unique as a Council to have come forward with a blueprint for recovery so quickly. There is so much good I could say about this document. So I really like to make it clear that we have been impressed with the speed and, imparts the vision of this document. I also concur with comments made at Scrutiny that you will discuss in a little while today, that the blueprint should also highlight the need to revisit the commercial investment strategy and the need to include important sectors such as higher education and the insurance industry going forward. But you won't be surprised that I'd like to highlight an issue regarding the green economy. I also agree with the recommendation that the blueprint's tackling of the climate change and green economy theme needs to take the required 13% annual emission reduction for Norwich as a central anchoring point, which it currently doesn't do. And the actions need to be focused on achieving this challenges target set by the Tyndall Centre for Norwich. I have to say I was a little bit concerned to hear that the leader of the council seemed to appear to rely on central government to kickstart a green economy. And I was wondering whether the Cabinet would commit to producing a clearer action plan that establishes how the council can actually drive a new green economy rather than hoping on central government efforts to ensure that we can achieve the required 13% annual emission reduction. Because I fear if we rely on central government, we won't be tackling the next challenge ahead, which will be making sure that we don't have a climate chaos coming up.
Sandra, thank you very much. James, would you like to give us the feedback from Scrutiny Committee this morning? Can I, first of all, thank Scrutiny Committee for their engagement with this agenda. It was a full meeting of 3 hours, and there was a lot of interest and ideas from around the table.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I think you're absolutely right. It was a 3-hour meeting, and Scrutiny had a thorough look at this blueprint, and which we recognise is a very good document and is essential for the recovery for the city. From a personal point of view, a number of the themes that Cabinet members have mentioned came up in the discussions. I was particularly interested that Councillor Davis talked about free school meals, which is something that came up in the Scrutiny report today, and ensuring that children are fed during the summer holidays. We had a wide-ranging discussion which resulted in many recommendations around the issues of the green economy, sustainable travel, housing, health and safety, young people, income generation, investment strategy and workers' rights. And I don't propose to read out in detail the wording from each of those recommendations, but just wanted to highlight to you the sort of the depth of the discussion that happened at Scrutiny. And I'm sure the committee would relish being able to look at this blueprint again as it develops, because we know that with the sort of fast pace developments around COVID-19 in the country, I can almost assume there'll be changes needed to this document by the time it gets to council in 12 days or so time, whenever it is. So no, it was very pleased to be able to take part in that, and hope you'll consider our 10 recommendations, which I know you've had for a couple of hours, positively. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James, and thank you for, I think, chairing one of the first Zoom meetings of the council, full meetings of the council committee. With those recommendations, as I think a number of people have said, including yourself, this is a working document. There are different paths ahead. Some of those are decisions that government crucially will make. Is it to be another blizzard of austerity, or is it going to be a reframing of the way government thinks about its role and its responsibilities towards its citizens and to its key institutions? And one of those is local government. I mean, I just would simply say that it's not fundamentally an issue of whether you squeeze local government or not. It's for government a question of whether they are going to value the citizens of this country, and in our case, this city, who have worked very hard to tackle the challenge of this pandemic. And they can either reward people who now, I think, value their local government a lot more, having seen the work that we have been able to do in a collaborative way and the services we've been able to deliver, or are they going to perhaps effectively punish people by cutting the funding to their local councils? And that's not a great return for things that people in the city have done to play their part in dealing with COVID-19. So what we'll do with the recommendations is we will, for the purposes of this meeting, we will note them. They will form part of our thinking about how we move forward, because I think many things, as Stephen has said and other people have said around the table, will change, will need to change. And there are opportunities that we must be ambitious about and take ourselves. So we have a further opportunity at full council, as you say, in a few days' time, where we can have a further wide-ranging discussion on how things move forward. And I'm sure in this fast-moving time, there'll be new factors to pull into the equation. So on that basis, could we accept the recommendation? The recommendation is that we invite council to approve the blueprint and action plan, but essentially that means that there is a further discussion, I think probably the first of many, about how we develop our own institutions, our own structures, but also how we engage with the sort of post-COVID environment as we move forward. Are we happy to accept the recommendations? Yeah, thumbs up will be enough, thank you. Okay, so let's move on. Thank you very much for all of those comments, and let's move on to the next item, which is the Mile Cross depot site options for redevelopment. Councillor Stannard is going to lead off on this item, but I know there will be contributions from Councillor Harris and Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you, Alan. So the purpose of this report is to consider options for the redevelopment or disposal of the former council depot at Mile Cross, and the recommendations are to approve, firstly, the appropriation of land at Mile Cross from the general fund to the HRA under Part 2, Schedule 19.1 of the Housing Act 1985 to enable a social housing-led development by the council. Secondly, environment of £180,000 from the approved Opportunities Fund to the Mile Cross Depot project to provide match funding for the business rates pooling bid for 2020 to allow the scheme to progress to a planning application. And thirdly, that officers further explore the opportunities and costs for designing and delivering the homes to achieve enhanced environmental standards to help reduce fuel poverty for residents. And there are several aspects to this, and as you said, Alan, Gail and Paul are going to add to the introduction as well. For those who don't know, the Mile Cross Depot was formerly our principal works depot. Subsequently, it was managed as a business centre, and the land there is allocated in the Greater Norwich local plan for mixed use to include housing and small business workshop units, a minimum of 75 dwellings. There was a site inspection in 2017 that showed that there were contaminants on the site that needed to be neutralised before any redevelopment. And so in September 2018, you may recall that we agreed to demolish the depot and decontaminate the site, and we set a budget for that. That work has now been done. Also, the council bid for business rates pooling funding for 2020 to assist this project. The thinking was that £360,000 will be required this year for surveys, design work, planning consultancy and project management. COVID-19 has delayed this work commencing, but it is believed by officers that the majority of it can still be completed by the end of this civic year. Also in 2018, we reported to Cabinet on a number of options that we had been considering for redeveloping the site. 5 options, you'll see those outlined at the bottom of page 73 of your papers. And Cabinet approved to investigate further option 3 as a preferred option, with an option 2 as a fallback. So option 3 was redevelop the site for housing and for leisure and community facilities. Option 2, the fallback, was redevelop the site for housing. Also, for that Cabinet report, options 1 to 5 were reviewed using central government's recommended 5-case methodology for producing business cases in the public sector, and those tests are set out at the top of page 74. Also, at that Cabinet meeting in November 2018, it was agreed Norwich Regeneration Limited would take forward the work to assess the residential options, and separately consultants would be commissioned to assess these options and business case for the leisure facility. Now, in terms of the leisure facility, the options were assessed with varying degrees of viability as a business model, but all of them required significant cross-subsidy from the residential element to build and to fund the build cost of the leisure centre. And the development viability undertaken by NRL showed that there would not be sufficient surplus generated from the residential scheme to fund the building of the leisure centre, sadly. The work carried out by NRL on the residential element has also concluded that there is insufficient evidence to support a commercially viable private residential development with 33% affordable housing. That means that 2 previously preferred development options fail a number of the public sector business case requirements, which I mentioned earlier on. So further options have now been explored to take the site forward. A, disposal of the land on the open market. B, social housing-led residential development. And C, the provision of a GP surgery and health facility on part of the site. With further uncertainty around the ground conditions and uncertainty in the current residential market due to the COVID-19 virus, it's difficult to get an exact market value on the site. However, NPS Norwich have provided a range based upon an assumed development that could be delivered, and this is explained in the exempt appendix to the report. The disposal of the site at this time would not represent value for money following the investment made to remediate the site, and therefore not a recommended option. So I'll move on now and pass over to Gail to talk about the social housing led development that we're now proposing. So I'll hand it. Are you ready, Gail?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gail. Off you go.
Thank you, Mike. That's really useful, sort of setting the scene. And yeah, I'm really excited by the proposal that's in front of us this afternoon. I think it's an integral part of the recovery plan, both in providing much needed homes and as an economic boost for the city. So if we agree with the 3 recommendations in front of us today, the land moves from the general fund to the HRA. This is the crucial first step. The former depot site in Mile Cross is very familiar to many people in this city, and the development of it has been long talked of. This is really the start of the journey towards another large-scale social housing-led development by Norwich City Council. And as a Labour administration, we are committed to building good quality social housing to a high environmental standard. However, this is not a paper about design. This is a paper that gives us the foundations to take the next steps. The proposed programme is clearly set out on page 76 and 77. We will build on the success of Goldsmith Street, and we will build a community and homes on the Mile Cross depot site for us all to be proud of. So one should really remember that Mile Cross was the first major housing estate built by this council about 100 years ago. And we can't wait to build more homes for the people of Norwich. I'm really, really excited by the prospect. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gail. Paul, did you have any points?
Yes, indeed. Yes, thank you very much. Sorry about the technical problems on the previous paper, but I'm very much in favour of this particular proposal. It really shows that we are a council that is progressing in terms of creating new houses. And this, of course, is on a brownfield site. It's a win-win situation. And I very much look forward, as indeed a resident of Mile Cross, to this development and to the homes that will be built for the people of Norwich.
Thank you very much, Paul. Are there any other comments from Cabinet members at all? Okay. Graham and Andrew, anything to add?
I don't think I've got anything to add to your debate at the moment, but I'm happy to assist with answering questions if there are any.
Thank you. Andrew? Andrew looks like he's frozen at the moment, so we'll move on.
Likewise, other than to say in this, can you not hear me?
Yes, just about.
Sorry, yeah, nothing really further to add other than initial discussions around the business rates falling bid shows that it is worthy of further consideration by Norfolk leaders. Okay,
thank you very much. Sandra, any questions on this? Can I first of all just ask on a technical point, are there any questions that anybody has about the below the line part of the Mile Cross depot site? Sufficient information provided above the line. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Sandra, back to you.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for bringing this detailed report about the next steps for the development of the Micros depot site. It is great to see that this is progressing further, and I'm really hopeful that we will be seeing a social housing-led development on this site with the additional benefit of a local GP surgery. However, I'm disappointed, as you can imagine, to see that the council is planning to move away from the passive house standard that has rightfully received worldwide praise at the Goldsmith Street development. I understand that building to a passive house standard or similar would have cost implications. However, I would like to question the extent of these cost implications, and I'm going to do this in a rather vague way so it doesn't touch anything below the line. Can you just clarify for me how the percentage increase in building to passive house standard in this location compares to the cost increase this has caused in the Goldsmith Street development, and then why you have come to a different conclusion for the Micros depot site compared to the Goldsmith Street site?
Okay, so who would like to answer that?
Shall I pick that one up, Alan?
Yes, you can.
So the costings that we've had to date were based on the Norwich Regeneration Limited master planning work, and they were working with a different set of quantity surveyors than we're working on the Goldsmith Street development. It's the best information that we have at this time. We will continue to look at the options for the development and then put that to members as to which is the preferred option for the standards.
Okay, right, thanks very much, Andrew. Any other comments on that particular point? No. James, anything you want to say on this report?
Well, only to say that I think it's really good that this is coming forward for development. It's an area that I know well, and that the housing is really needed. And so yes, I'm supportive of this.
Okay, thank you. Right, any further comments? Right, so this is an excellent initiative. As Gail reminds us, Mile Cross was first major council housing estate, and it's good that we're giving it an injection of some new homes in the historic site. So can we accept the recommendations? Great, thank you very much. Okay, let's go on to item 7, which is the East Norwich partnership. So Councillor Stannard, Mike, here to introduce it.
Thank you, Alan. It's really exciting to be at the point with East Norwich of presenting this report. And what we're looking is to seek approval for the proposed terms of reference for the East Norwich Partnership, which I'll explain is a new public-private sector partnership to steer the preparation of a master plan to deliver a new residential-led mixed-use quarter in the city that will support the future growth of the city, and also to note the content of the master plan brief as a basis for procurement. Two very simple recommendations. Firstly, to approve the terms of reference for the partnership and the council's participation in it, and also to endorse the position statement on Trowse Rail Bridge, which is also a significant element. The Carroll Works site, as you know, has recently become available for redevelopment. Sadly, following the departure of Britvic Unilever, which, as I say, is something that we've all been very, very sad about in the city. However, that does present a major opportunity to unlock development on the wider East Norwich sites, including the long-term vacant and heavily constrained deal and utilities sites. That means that we can significantly increase the scale of development that can be achieved, and it gives us the potential to attract significant public sector investment in the infrastructure needed to ensure delivery. And I have to say, I believe at one point, and I think this is probably still the case, I'm sure Graham will correct me if I'm wrong, this was the largest brownfield site outside London in the country for development. So it's really, really exciting, and it's something which will attract interest in terms of investment. There are a number of significant challenges to delivery on the East Norwich sites. There's restricted access, flood risk, site contamination, also heritage buildings there. Also in the area, the strategic road network has limited capacity. in terms of significant additional traffic generation. And key infrastructure requirements include roads and bridges, sustainable transport links, green infrastructure, potentially a marina, and social and community infrastructure, potentially including a new primary school. Just to note that the emerging planning framework for Greater Norwich identifies the East Norwich Strategic Regeneration Area, which includes the 3 sites. The vision, well, an awful lot of work has been done on the vision. In 2018, the Council commissioned a study to explore the opportunities presented by the availability of the Carrow Works site. That's a document called A Vision for East Norwich, and that forms the basis of the emerging vision for the area to be refined and tested through master planning. And it does, and one of the reasons this is so exciting, it identifies the release of Carrow Works as presenting a once-in-a-generation opportunity to address the challenges of the 3 sites strategically, and sets out a vision for East Norwich as the new productive quarter for the future growth of the city. However, to unlock the full development potential of the site, we'll need to provide new infrastructure to allow for sustainable growth to be focused there. And so there is a need to further develop and refine the vision by identifying and costing those infrastructure investment requirements and identifying an appropriate delivery mechanism to oversee that investment and delivery of development. Progress to date, well, there has been positive engagement with the key East Norwich stakeholders over recent months. The council has convened and chaired a meeting of all the key stakeholders. That took place in January. It had representatives of the landowners, the agents and the developers for the 3 sites, and also key public sector representatives, the New Anglia LEP and Homes England. And the important thing about that meeting was that it produced a positive commitment from all parties to work together to realise the site's regeneration potential, explore the creation of a partnership body and oversee development of a delivery strategy for the sites. Since then, there have been further one-to-one meetings with all the partners to ensure they're still interested, and those are very successful meetings, I'm pleased to say. There's also been ongoing engagement with Homes England in recent months. They are, of course, a key stakeholder with an interest in the regeneration potential of East Norwich, given its particular remit to accelerate housing delivery nationally. So the first meeting of the partnership took place on the 12th of May, building on that ongoing positive engagement. It was attended by all those that I mentioned previously, plus Norfolk County Council, the Broads Authorities and South Norfolk Council. It discussed the draft terms of reference, a draft master plan brief and high-level timescales and budget. It was positive and constructive, and it discussed the draft terms of reference. Now you've got those to look at. I won't go through those in detail because you can see those in your papers. But the important thing is that this is not a formal body, it's an informal partnership. So it's one that everyone is there because they want to be there and everyone agrees to what goes through it because it's of mutual benefit to agree to it. But also the membership purpose and scope of responsibilities is all set out. I think it's important a significant member involvement in that group as well, and I think that's something that we should commit to. In terms of the master plan brief, that's also been discussed, informed by discussion with partners, and the paper sets out the envisaged 3-stage process. From stage 1, a high-level master plan, stage 2, detailed viability assessment and financial appraisals, and then stage 3, advice on will be informed by the outcomes of the stages 1 and 2. And that will be advice on appropriate delivery and funding mechanisms. And members are asked to note the content. The likely cost of the commission for stages 1 and 2 is anticipated to be around £500,000 and to take about 12 to 18 months to complete. Major issues like this are not resolved quickly. The work takes time to be done properly, of course. So there's 12 to 18 month timescale there. It's proposed that the City Council contributes £100,000 towards this, half from existing budgets and half from the Town Deal Capacity Fund. And that was agreed at the Town Deals Board on the 26th of May. And also confirmation is being sought for funding from public and private sector partners on the basis set out in the terms of reference, and we'll keep you updated on that. And the idea is it will seek tenders for the scope and fee for stage 1 and an indicative response to the scope of work and the fee for stage 2. Just want to say a brief word about Trowse Rail Bridge. It is a pinch point. We know that it's a pinch point on the rail network, and one of the key infrastructure aspects that needs to be considered as part of this is what will happen with Trowse Rail Bridge. It's only single track, and it's part of the main line between Norwich and London, but also a significant barrier to east-west movement, which is something that we're committed to addressing as a council with partners. As it's a pinch point, it needs to be improved significantly, or it will limit the possibility for further enhancement of the main line. And so New Anglia LEP has formed a working group of local partners who are engaging with Network Rail to progress the case for improvement of the Trowse Rail Bridge. And as a first step in the process of promoting improvements to the bridge, there's a position statement which is attached to Appendix 3 for you to endorse. So I've set out what the proposals are and recommendations that we're asking you to agree to. This is a major site in the city. It could be an exciting new quarter that will drive development and employment and residential and social purposes. And that's what we're trying to kickstart here today. So I commend this to you and ask you to support the recommendations.
Thanks, Mike. Very, very comprehensive presentation of the report. Thank you very much. At this point, Graham or Judith, do you have any points you would want to add to what Mike has said?
I don't think there's anything I particularly want to update on in relation to Mike's comments, but in the report we did mention we would update just briefly in terms of how the discussions are going with landowners. I don't want to mention particular names because clearly there are commercial discussions ongoing with individual people, but I think we've now reached a position where we're confident through the external partners and the private sector landowners who have responded to date. We think we are very likely to have sufficient funds incoming into the project to enable us to proceed fairly promptly with stage 1 of the exercise.
That's encouraging news. Judith, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sorry, no, I don't think there's anything I need to add, but I'm happy to answer any particular questions you've got.
Okay, so cabinet members, any comments at all? Karen?
Yeah, it's just a comment. I would like to see the access group listed in the stakeholders. So you have a list of partners and then a list of desired partners. And I'd like to see the access group as one of those partners approached, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Sandra?
Yes, please. I've got to say it's really truly exciting to see that there is now a plan which may achieve redeveloping 2 large brown sites, which, as you've said, have been unused for such a long time. So I've got to say I support the principle of the development and therefore also the principle of forming the partnership that is why they're required to progress it. However, I mean, Councillor Stannard talked about significant member involvement. So far, we haven't had that member involvement. I've heard from councillors from the wards that the 3 sites fall in that they haven't heard about anything about this plan before and that they found out about it in the cabinet papers. And I think if the council should have taken away anything from the past few years and other development endeavours, it should be to offer transparency and include the local community in decision making early on. I'm glad to see that the partnership will include groups like the Norwich Society, which provides some local representation. However, I think that's not enough. Will the Cabinet commit to changing the terms of reference to include more community representation through ward councillors and active community groups in the area?
Mike, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we want to see community and member involvement in such developments. I think, Sandra, the point is that at this point, what we've done is we've set up the arrangements by which we will drive this forward. So it's been very much ourselves, other key partners and the landowners sort of putting that into place. And I think the point where now we would involve more people in it will be through having the terms of reference for the partnership board and who needs to be involved. I think there's a question that we need to go away and look at, which is where's the appropriate place for member and community involvement. It might be that it's not the partnership board, which has a particular process and actually doesn't make decisions. I mean, all the individual members will have to ratify decisions which are made there. So it might be that the best way to achieve that involvement is through the council, but that's something that we can take away and look at. I don't think the partnership board is intended to be a sort of a representative body of the community at large. I think it's actually a board which has got a job to do, and we need to look for other ways to involve people. But I'm more than happy to do that. I do think in terms of membership at the moment, it's sort of officer level, and part of the point about community political involvement is I think myself and Alan as politicians, either or, should be there to make sure there is that political input, because it's, as I say, it's very much an officer body at the moment with officer doing the job that officers do. So I think that's something that we need to bottom out. So I'm trying to be clear, as clear as I can, Sandra. I agree with you, but I think actually the partnership board might not be the vehicle for that, is what I'm saying in a roundabout way. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll make sure we look for the right form of engagement. There's plenty of opportunity to do that. We needed the kind of framework just to get things moving. Anything from you at all, James?
Well, just to say that I think this is a really exciting project, and recognising that I did just hear what Mike said, but I'm going to say this anyway. I'm just concerned on behalf of Traz Primary School, which is yet to open because it's a new build that's scheduled to open in September 2020. Where there's discussion in the document about a new build on this site. Can we make sure that Traz Primary School are involved in discussions as the plan progresses? Simply because I'm concerned that what a new school might do to the modelling around their numbers that have precipitated this new build that isn't even open yet. So if we can make sure they're in the loop, that would be good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, yes, Mike.
I mean, you're obviously, James, it's absolutely right that the planning doesn't take place in isolation. You'll note that the county council is one of the key partners, and also, of course, each partner will have to ratify its own decisions as part of this process. So, I mean, we'll bear that in mind, but of course, the county council will know that that's its job and its responsibility. Yeah, good. Yes, Graham.
Alan, can I just pick up the points that I think both Councillor Wright and Councillor Bogling made about community engagement? Just we've come at this at a certain approach, because what we need to develop is a degree of credibility and a degree of momentum into this process. So we effectively had to start with the landowners and the people who control that land to get that credibility, so we can engage with organisations like Homes England. But in terms of moving this process forward, no decisions have been made about the content of the master plan at this stage as yet. And the first stage of the brief sees the task for the consultant will be to engage with the community and advise on an appropriate implementation and engagement strategy for how you're going to manage that, because clearly there's going to be a massive degree of public member interest. It's hard to identify those specific bodies at this stage. We'll need to go out and consult on, actually find out who are those interested bodies, and that's written into the brief. So we expect quite a considerable amount of time and effort to be developed into developing that strategy for engagement of a whole range of individuals and stakeholders and interested parties. It's impossible to actually identify all those people who would have an interest in the process at this particular stage.
Thanks very much, Graham. That's helpful. for clarification. So can we now go to the recommendations? Are we happy to agree them all? Yeah, thumbs up and so on. Excellent. Okay, so now we move on to item 8, and this is where Councillors Stannard and Kendrick have declared a pecuniary interest, not a personal pecuniary interest, I might add, but they are directors of NRL, and it is an item about expenditure. So if you could turn your videos off and mute your microphones, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, so this report comes in my name. Very recently, we had a discussion about the business plan for NRL for the financial year 2020-2021, and the business plan would have been available to councillors to see. But that was before COVID-19, and this paper is about an adjustment to the capital programme with options with regard to Norwich Regeneration Limited. And what it does is acknowledges the fact that the COVID pandemic is a challenge. What we are discussing here is a commercial decision to take account of the impact of COVID. And the report makes very clear, drawing on detailed and specialist knowledge about the broader property market and the challenges it faces. And for those of you who've read through this report, one could be looking at a range of reductions in the value of house prices from something between 5 and 20%. The range is wide, but it does highlight the fact that it is an uncertain environment. And so that's the context in which we are considering this report. One other thing I would say is that I, with other Norfolk leaders, have written to the government to ask them for additional flexibilities and powers in relation to the housing revenue account, right to buy receipts, but also in relation to housing companies. And housing companies are a very common part of the landscape which enable local authorities to a flexibility about building to all tenures, because we are a strategic housing authority. So I've got further comments to make, but I've contextualised the circumstances in which this report comes to us. And I'm going to ask for Dave Shaw, who's the Managing Director of NRL, to say a few words about the report and some of the details. I'm going to ask Hannah Simpson to take us through some of the options. There are 2 options, and there are a series of choices, limited choices, I have to say, which we have to consider in relation to the way forward. So I'm going to start with Dave, and then I'll move on to Hannah. Dave.
Thank you, Alan, and good afternoon. Just as a way of an introduction, I would just like to take the opportunity to give a short highlight of some of the improvements that NRL has gone through since 2019, specifically some improved outcome to the project that is Rain Park, obviously touching on the lessons learned on that journey through 2019 to date. And then I'll just quickly mention the impacts of COVID-19 and try to dovetail into Anna and the covering report. So obviously from the start of 2019, the company has worked very hard indeed to stabilise and consolidate its position. That's been a collective effort by the board of directors and myself, of course, with support from council and back office support staff. In doing so, in consolidating our operating position, the company has remained committed to the company goals, which were to build tenure blind, high quality housing in great neighbourhoods, focused on environmental standards, enhanced environmental standards, ensuring that homes then are highly efficient to run. We are always planning policy compliant, enhanced space standards, and throughout this consolidation process, ensuring that we have a greater transparency back to the council. To deliver these goals, I would like to make comment that operating as a commercial developer, it is very difficult to balance those goals, and you need a great awareness and appropriate competency within the company to ensure that overall viability of developments moving forward remain in a positive state. The company continues to remain committed to its business outcomes, which is that back to the council, the interest repayments on the loans that we take out for our developments, the recharges for back office support, delivery of product for HRA at an affordable rate, and obviously we've started to build up an asset bank in the private rented property portfolio. I do believe that the company can demonstrate that we now have better financial control and management in place. We clearly understand our overall operating costs, and we really are now visible with shareholder, i.e. the council, on where these costs are now situated. How have we achieved this? We've achieved this by understanding and controlling the indirect costs on the business, as well as the project costs on the business. We review our costs on the company monthly, and that's a robust process with our commercial accountant on cash flow profile and the overall management accounts on the company. We've introduced a robust residential viability appraisal method to ensure that new projects that we're currently undertaking are set against benchmark industry standards. We've introduced, obviously, a better knowledge of the housing market in Norwich and how to place product into the housing market to maximise sale revenue. We've introduced more robust knowledge around contracting and contract management, and that can be seen in the contractual changes to our JCT design and build contracts. And of course, we've finally revised our NRL business model and our loan facility agreements such that these are in line with those viability appraisals I mentioned. Specifically on Rain Park, the improvements I'd like to quickly highlight was that on section 1, we obviously spoke before in November and passing of the business plan for this year, that we revised our standards on the remaining 31 properties for sale on that particular development. And we had a solid market approach with those products, and we were successful in selling our remaining stock plots, albeit for a revised sale revenue price from what we'd originally foreseen in the company in the early years of the business. We've enhanced the landscape strategy and mindful then of future sales as we roll out sections 3, 4 and 2. With regards to sections 3, 4 and 2, we're now in a better renegotiated contractual position. We have moved from RG Carter to Carter Homes. Carter's recognising the fact to centralise expertise within their own business group. We've insisted on a more robust contractual position, therefore removing provisional sum and creating fixed sum items within the contract, therefore giving us a fixed sum contract value. This has also led to a better robust position on liquidated damages for the company, such that if time and extension of time to programme is required by main contractor, then we're in a stronger position. Finally, I would mention that we've placed clear water between section 1 and the growing pains and the lessons learned from section 1 in terms of marketing. We are now rebranding the site. The site will be known as Trinity Gardens at Rain Park. We've installed, obviously, a new sales agent in WH Brown to take us forward with that rebranding. I would also say that the reconfiguration of the housing mix, the limited ability I had to change the housing design whilst working in the constraints of the original contract and our planning constraints, does result in a clearly better product. It's priced more appropriately in the market, and it is indeed going to maximise its place within Norwich. On lessons learned, obviously, in short, I've gone on record many times about the observations and the advice that I deem necessary to take this operation forward. But I do believe we were on the verge of starting to create success with the company, and I was very happy with the business plan coming into March, and nobody would have envisaged that the pandemic would have taken such a grip on the world, let alone this country. But I have to just point out at this point that the quality of finish now in our product does make me believe that we can ride through some of the difficulties of what we will face in the housing market. As I repeat, the housing mix, the subtle changes to design features and focusing on that finished quality does make me believe that our product now sits shoulder to shoulder, if not above, some of our competitors. And I stand firm that I would challenge, politely of course, all of you guys to look at our competitors, whether this be at Sprowston on Manor Park or in Cossing when our product launches in July. And you will see, whether it be Norfolk Homes, whether it be Hopkin Homes, Taylor Wimpey Persimmons, you'll see that our product sits really well when you look at the finished quality, therefore giving us every opportunity to maximise a sale and, importantly, maximise the sales revenue where we have based all our costs upon. Just finally, before handing over to Hannah, and of course I'm here to answer any questions following Hannah's overview of the paper. COVID-19 of course has impacted this company when I talk about the consolidation and the stabilisation, and indeed the desire to want to enter into a growth phase. And of course nobody has a crystal ball to truly understand what these effects will be to this company and to other companies. But as I repeat, you know, the product now is of that finished quality that I expect. It's running to time, albeit the delays imposed by COVID-19. But because of the contractual negotiations we've gone through, it puts us in a strong position. Of course, we still have to manage our extension to loan repayments that we would have to pay council. But that is something we are working closely with our financial support team on managing the impact of that. I will hand over to Anna, and like I said, I'm here to assist and help with any further discussion and questions. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. So Hannah, we've got a very detailed appraisal of two possible options. One is to enable the completion building contract to deliver 74 new homes for sale and rent, and so on. And the other option is to effectively not provide the funding stream that are listed in the recommendations. Can you just take us through the implications of both those options?
Yeah, so certainly. So as you mentioned, the report sets out those two options. The first one is to build out Rain Park sections 2 to 4, or the second option is essentially is that the council doesn't provide any more funding to the company, and the company is forced into a situation where it needs to wind up through a liquidation process. When we talk about option 1 about building out Rain Park 2 to 3, it's important to think we're not thinking about a single estimate, as you mentioned already, and Dave's continued to explain. There's a lot of uncertainty in some of the key variables that will impact on the performance of the company if we continue to build out Rain Park. The two key ones being the timing of the sales of houses, and the second being the sales value in relation to the wider kind of market conditions. So what we've done under option 2 is to set out a sort of sensitivity analysis that works on those two key variables to understand the sort of the total extent potentially of the impact on the company of continuing. That analysis shows an estimate between 6.1 million and 10.4 million pounds worth of cumulative losses that may end up sitting in the company under those different scenarios. We've compared that with an option of winding up the company. Again, there's a lot of estimates involved in coming up with that calculation. But our estimate suggests that would potentially leave losses in the company of over 11 million pounds. So you can see on that initial kind of analysis under all of those options of option 1, so continuing to build out, that range of outcomes are better than the liquidation option at this point in time. But obviously there is a number of uncertainties that we flagged in that modelling. Option 1 has impacts in terms of the capital programme for the council. So to enable the company to build out those phases, it will need additional loan financing and additional equity investment in the form of the council purchasing additional shares. So the recommendation sets out the scale of those increases to the loan facility, increasing it up to £21 million from the current 11.4 million, and also enabling another £3.5 million worth of shares in the company. What I would say is we've set that loan and equity level at the level needed to ensure that the company can build out the remaining phase, regardless of the timing of those sales. So it's the sort of the worst case scenario in terms of the loan financing that the company would need, and to give it that flexibility and security. That loan would only be advanced to the company as and when they need the cash. And we would obviously keep under review the performance of the company. Hopefully as sales come through, the full loan won't be required, but it's there to give it security that it can finish the build. That's probably the kind of the key points. So happy to take any questions on the detail.
Okay, are there any other officer comments at this stage? Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. It is set out in Table 1, paragraph 20, but just a point to reiterate that if option 2 essentially loses control of the asset, if we go with option 1, at the end of that we have 74 houses which are built, and then essentially we determine what to do with them and we sell them on the open market. If we go with option 2, we lose control of that asset, we lose the houses, and it essentially goes to the liquidator. So I just wanted to stress that point. It is in the table, but it's a point about housing development.
Yes, thank you. Right, Cabinet colleagues, questions or observations? Beth?
Thank you. It's from my point of view more an observation. Just thanks to Dave, Hannah, and others for very clear explanations and analysis of potential risk, which makes us, as someone who's a nurse, not someone who knows about building, it makes it a lot easier for me now to start to understand the decisions we're making. And I think we're in a lot clearer, despite the uncertainty of COVID, I feel a lot more informed now on the decisions we're having to make. And there is always risk. But I think, as my Cabinet colleagues know, I can bang on about the standard of private housing and housing across tenures for hours. And actually to know that in Norwich, really high quality spec housing is being built is something just to be incredibly proud of. And it's very clear from many very patient conversations with Dave, of very clear lessons learned and a way forward. So I just want to say how much I support this and hope that we can move forward with the development.
Thank you very much, Beth. Gail, please, and then Karen.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Beth has said, actually, and the clarity of the report and the explanations from the officers have been incredibly useful, because this is a commercial decision. And when you see it sort of put on a piece of paper in front of you, we need homes of whatever tenure in this city. And at the end, if we go with the build out, we will have 74 really good quality homes. We know the quality that the company can build. And I know how much work Dave has done as the managing director. He's done everything in his powers to control the costs without sacrificing quality, but within the contract that we have. So I'm very supportive of us going with the recommendations, and if need be, I'll come back if there's any other comments I need to make. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I'd also wanted to thank Dave, actually. I know that Beth and I in particular probably have asked him a lot of questions about this, and he has explained everything very thoroughly. We've seen every single document we've asked to see, and everything has been made very clear. I have been exceptionally impressed with the work that was done on the Bullard development already, and I do have complete faith that Dave can steer this and deliver us very good quality housing. So yes, I am in support of this, and thanks to Dave and the team.
Okay, any other Cabinet colleagues want to come in? I'll start with opposition colleagues? Then I'll start with James on this occasion first.
Thank you very much, Chair. I find Dave's candid assessment of the current situation facing the company very helpful, actually, and so thank you for that. I suppose the question I have is, given the range and reduction of house prices that have been talked about, what scope is there around increasing the amount of private rental from the properties? So don't put any out to the open market at the moment, and sit on the asset, using it entirely for rental income until such time as the market improves. Is that, forgive me if I missed it in the report, but I didn't see references to that in the report, and I don't know whether is that likely to be something that could be possible. And I think possibly another point that I've raised previously in relation to NRL. I mean, I'm keen and looking, and we talked about this at scrutiny before, about whether there is options to improve or change governance around the way that the company is looked at from a council perspective. So there's a sort of a couple of points on that. Thank you.
Okay, Dave, did you want to come back?
Yep, I can come back. To Councillor Wright's first comment, the company is looking to place some of the asset into our privately owned rented company. Anna and myself will sit down and understand whether we can raise those levels of what we would put on into our property portfolio versus going for an open market sale. What I would say about the information on the UK housing market that's in the report, what we're very keen on as a company, of course, that sets a benchmark. It's from obviously leading experts, people such as Savills, but we're working very closely with our sales agent in distilling that information of what's happening right here in Norwich. And we're working very hard at understanding movement in house sales that have continued through COVID. As we relax out of the lockdown, again, we're assessing monthly some sales data. And the shame of the timings to COVID for us as a company was we were just about to launch our sale product, Open Abbey. And we want to get to that stage where we've opened the marketing suite and we've actually started to generate interest around our product, so that we're more informed about speaking to council and the risk on our loan, and therefore being more informed about whether we have to start to change our strategy of sale. So whether that is to start talking more about putting the asset into a private rented portfolio, whether to start looking at other third parties that may be able to assist in those sales rather than just being dependent on open market sales. But I air caution on this point because really our finances are underpinned by maximising sale revenue on open market. And as Ope explained clearly, we've done a lot of work on resetting that expected realistic market value. So I do believe, as I repeat, and I'm sorry to keep repeating this, but the quality of those homes I am actually proud of. And I wasn't proud on Section 1. I'm now very proud. As I repeat, go and see some of our competitors and then come into our show home. That gives us our best opportunity to create data and interest around our product. Then we can start making, as I repeat, more informed decision about whether we have to change our sales strategy or move the product into other places. I hope that was okay for you, Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Stephen.
Just picking up the point about governance, I have been keen to improve governance, and we are in the process of recruiting 2 non-executive directors to the board, and I hope that we'll be in a position to make an announcement on that very soon.
Thanks for that.
Thank you very much. And Sandra.
Thank you. If you allow me, before I come to my question, I'd first of all like to say that I was reassured to hear all the additional management strategies and the additional expertise that was brought in that Dave has outlined. But I also have to say, when you ran through the list, I was again quite shocked that these things had to be put in place long after NRL was set up and operating. I just don't understand how the council, for example, entered the endeavour without what you call the knowledge of the housing market, just to name one. So I think that shows the lack that was there when the company was first established. Now, I understand that this current situation has been created by factors that are out of the council's and the company's control. But I also found it hard to believe that in the report it says that NRL has not yet completed a review of their governance, as James has already highlighted that there is an issue, and it's just difficult for me that NRL comes back to the council and asks for more money before this governance review has been completed. And I just don't see how the council can aim to make an objective decision about whether to pour more money into NRL or to wind the company up, when the people making the decisions are basically the lender as well as the borrower. So I would like to hear a little bit more from Stephen how these two non-executive members positions would help with the with this conflict of interest and therefore ensure better governance, please.
Well, essentially, we've gone out for two non-exec directors precisely to bring some independence to the board, and we've gone out through various kind of specialist publications. We want to get people with the right level of experience. Interviews have taken place this week. I think there's more interviews to come. I haven't been on the panel. Graham has, so you might want to just comment. Obviously, we can't comment on kind of the anything to do with individuals until that process has happened. That is one of the ways that we will bring independent expertise to the board. That was an outstanding action when I arrived, and we've pushed it through, and I think that will make a big difference. There are other things that came up through the audit of NRL, which we've also made progress on. But I think the NEDs will bring that independent thought. I might just quickly ask Graham if he's got anything to add.
Clearly, we can't tell you anything further about the process other than it's underway. But what I think might help you understand is we had a very strong field of people who applied for those opportunities, bringing a wealth of potential experience across a range of subjects. And we're sort of halfway through the interview process, but the strength of the candidates who we have interviewed to date has been, I think, massively impressive, and will bring a huge level of insight and expertise to the board. And one of the things that I constantly reflect on is how people with a considerable amount of expertise and indeed national reach are constantly drawn back to Norwich and want to basically assist the council in actually making it a better place. There is a huge amount of goodwill and loyalty out there to the place of Norwich, and this is one thing that we can really take advantage of in terms of, trying to build forward this aspirational company.
Okay. Right. Before we come to the recommendations, I just want to pick up one strand which has kind of run through the NRL story, and that's been accusations of a lack of transparency, and that perhaps motivated a person or persons unknown to leak a previous report on LRL, which then found its way into Private Eye. And the impression perhaps gained from the Private Eye article was that the council was, as it were, doing stuff behind closed doors. Now, while I'm just saying that, my battery is about to run out, so I need to just move across here, so my eloquence is not cut short. Join you in a slightly different location. Okay, that's fine. So what are the realities? The realities are this, that there are, under the 1972 Act, certain items specified by law of a particular character that have to be held in confidence. And those can be contracts, they can be procurements, they can be personnel issues. Who, for example, would like to be named in the public arena as somebody perhaps liable for a redundancy as a result of a reorganisation, or which contractor bidding for a contract with the council would like to see their figures in the public arena. We would be taken to court and sued, and quite rightly too. But there are people who are privileged to have below the line reports, and that includes all elected members of the council. And so I did a little exercise with, thanks to the Democratic Services team, to see how often NRL featured in our work as elected members. And I asked for that report to go back 3 years. So if we take it from the beginning of the new civic year in 2017, NRL was either a report in its own right or part of other reports around local, the finances of the council, and it came to Cabinet 23 times. The most recent occasion was February 2020, and here it is again in June. It went to the Audit Committee 12 times, and as we know, Audit Committee is a committee which is chaired by not a member of administration, but of a member of the opposition. And on those 12 occasions, Councillor Price, who was a member of the Green Group, was chairing the meetings when NRL was discussed. It's come to Council 11 times, and it's come to scrutiny at least 4 times. So in that period, 52 times NRL has been discussed, and it has been a journey, and the council has not hidden away the fact that it's had teething problems and difficulties and had to reset itself. And here we are with a new framework, which has now been challenged by COVID. So people may question some of the decisions, and they have, and that's fine. And the council has responded to those. The most recent response has been to go through a process which we can finish it this week, which is about non-executive directors who will bring expertise to the table. But what it can't be accused of is a lack of transparency, because all councillors have had their opportunity to discuss, to consider, and to offer opinions on this particular issue. No elected member has been left out of this process. Everybody has had their opportunity. So I would just like to remind people, and perhaps help to inform the press and the local media, that this is something which has been exhaustively discussed, has been available for all members to contribute to, both formally and informally. So with those comments, can I now take us to the recommendations? We have some choices, and the recommendations lead us to option 1 as a way forward. We've tested that proposition this afternoon, colleagues. Are we happy to accept the recommendations? And you will note that one of the recommendations is to continue to explore housing options as we go forward, to take account of the changing landscape that we are in. But I would say that the decision we are making today is based on the figures presented to us, the context in which those figures are set, and it is a commercial decision. Are we happy to accept the recommendations? Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. Thumbs up. Right, I shall just go back to my papers. Let's please then move on to item 9, which is the Local Development Scheme 2020 to 2022. And this is to consider the comments made by the Sustainable Development Panel regarding the draft revised Local Development Scheme. And that is in the name of Councillor Mike Stannard. Mike, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alan. So the purpose of the report is to consider the comments made by the Sustainable Development Panel, which was a little while ago now, and to seek approval for the draft revised local development scheme. And the recommendation is to approve that scheme for publication under the relevant acts. So just a reminder, briefly, the local development scheme, I'll say LDS from now on, it's easier, must be prepared as part of the statutory process of plan making. And what it is the work programme and project plan for the preparation of various planning policy documents making up the local plan for the city. Given that Norwich City Council is working with South Norfolk and Broadland on the preparation of the Greater Norwich local plan, the revised LDS has been undertaken in coordination with these other authorities to ensure continuity. The revised LDS will run to spring 2022 and will entirely supersede the version published in October 2018. Now, the revised LDS was due to be reported to Sustainable Development Panel on the 18th of March. However, that meeting was cancelled due to the pandemic. So the document was circulated to members of the panel for comment. There were no specific comments made on the LDS, and therefore there are no resultant changes. The revised LDS for approval by Cabinet was drafted before the COVID-19 lockdown, and it's too soon, we think, to tell what impact COVID-19 will be on the timescales for local plan preparation. So just to be aware, it is possible, therefore, that a further revision will need to be published when that becomes clear. The focus of the revised LDS is on the preparation and adoption of strategic high-level planning policies and site allocations in Norwich, achieved through two key planning documents. They are the emerging Greater Norwich Local Plan and the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework. The revised LDS also includes provision for the review of the DM Policies Plan at the end of 2019. And just a word on supplementary documents and guidance. Following the cessation of the Britvic, Coldman's and Unilever operations at Carrow Works, as we have been saying earlier on, as I reported earlier on and we discussed, we've been working with key partners to commission a master plan to regenerate that area, which is capable of being adopted as a supplementary planning document. And the master plan will aim to guide the coordinated redevelopment of the site with a focus on the delivery of transformational change in this key area of Norwich and inform the Regulation 19 version of the GNLP. As I say, there's a separate report that you've seen on that. The LDS also identifies a number of other work streams that are either committed or potential additional work streams required to satisfy changes to national policy and guidance or changing local circumstances. So in conclusion, the principal challenges to meet the aims and timescales set out in the revised LDS relate to changes in national policy, the availability of resources, timescales surrounding the GNLP preparation process, and the continued joint working with other authorities across Norfolk. Information about the work streams identified and any new priorities will be reported to Sustainable Development Plan as required and will be included in any future revisions to the LDS as appropriate. So I'll take you back to the recommendation, which is to approve the LDS for publication under the relevant legislation, which is set out in the recommendations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Judith, anything to add?
Nothing other than to say that the version has been subject to some very minor factual changes since it was reported to SD panel, as set out in paragraph 6, just for example, to reflect the current stage of the East Norwich master plan and to making reference to an office study that's currently underway. So just a few minor factual updates, but otherwise it's the same as when it went to SD panel.
Okay, thank you very much, Judith. Cabinet colleagues, any observations? Karen?
Thank you. How is this going to interact with Genric's new kind of shake-up of planning policy, shall we say? And I was reading something, I think in one of the housing magazines, about the government actually taking away a lot of the planning powers from local authorities.
That was reported. I think there was a Sunday Times article over the weekend that's prompted a bit of press speculation about the future. We are as informed as anybody else who's read those press articles. There's nothing formal out from government. It was unnamed sources leaking to the media. Clearly, if the government withdraw planning powers from local authorities or otherwise change the legislation that we operate under, we'll need to update our plans accordingly. So we can't really comment at this stage, but the legislation that we're working to and the government guidance that informs the exercise for your decision today is the current legislative framework in place. And if the government want to change that, they'll need to go through a process about that.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from Cabinet colleagues, other officers? Okay, Sandra?
Yes, so UEA has produced a draft development framework strategy for 2030 to guide future development on campus and provide part of the evidence base for the preparation of the Greater Norwich Local Plan. In its role as the local planning authority, will the council ask the university whether it intends to revisit the strategy in the light of the government's announcement to cap student numbers and also the possible adverse impact of COVID-19 on overseas students planning to come to UK universities in the near future?
I think perhaps, did Graham, did you want to come in on that? You looked like you were leaning towards the microphone.
I was just seeing if I could check where it was referred to. My recollection, I'm sure Judith will correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have already been through a process with the development framework strategy for UEA, and so that has been through the process, and Cabinet's already reached a decision about it. Clearly, UEA periodically and ourselves meet and discuss the relevant needs at the moment. That hasn't led to any decision from either the council to request or UEA to seek to change that framework, which still plans. So at the moment, the evidence is as was previously reported to Cabinet.
Okay, good. James?
Thank you. I don't have any points to make on this one. Thank you.
Okay, so can we go to the recommendations then, please? Are we happy to accept the recommendations? Thumbs up. Excellent. Right, let's move on. Thank you very much for that. Civil parking enforcement agreement. Mike, you to start again.
Yes, thank you, Alan. This comes out of the termination of the highways agreement on the 31st of March. That was a decision made by the County Council, their Environment, Transport and Development Committee on the 18th of January, something that we very much regret as a City Council, I must say. However, when they made that decision, they asked the City Council to continue to carry out civil parking enforcement alongside enforcement of delegated moving traffic offences, which currently extends to only bus lanes, and that's the subject of a separate agreement. So at the moment, with the demise of the agency agreement, there's a short-term temporary agreement in place allowing civil parking enforcement to take place, pending the consideration and agreement, hopefully, of this report, which will put in place interim arrangements for a period of time. The aim of the county is to fully integrate Norwich into the Norfolk Parking Partnership in due course. So this is for a period until that happens. So the arrangements are set out, paragraphs 5 and 6. The agreement is proposed for an interim period of up to 2 years. It's intended that the new agreement, that when we, as the county wishes us to join the Norfolk Parking Partnership, that will replace this agreement. There's a copy of the interim agreement at Appendix 1, but basically it sets out that it's a 2-year agreement with the option to extend by up to a further 3 years. It delegates all aspects of on-street parking enforcement and adjudication to the city. County Council is responsible for setting all fees and charges on street pay and display parking and permits, but those fees and charges will be recommended by the City Council. 18 months notice to terminate. County Council covering all reasonable costs that the City Council incurs in carrying this out, which is good news. Any surplus generated will fund transport projects in the Norwich administrative area, and the city will be responsible for identifying and consulting on any changes required to parking restrictions in the city. Those are the highlights. Broadly in line with previous arrangements, although there are some areas of difference in paragraph 7. And then the report talks about the permanent agreement. So the conclusion of the proposal is that we agree to enter into an agreement with Norfolk County Council for the provision of on-street civil parking enforcement services for a period until the 31st of March 2022, with an option to extend by up to 3 years, or until a revised Norfolk Parking Partnership Agreement is in place, whichever is soonest. It's important that we agree this, because we need to continue carrying out this function in the city.
Thank you, Mike. Jo, anything to add?
Nothing from me, no, thank you.
Right, any other Cabinet colleagues? Anything? Yeah, Karen?
Thanks. Mike, when you talk about any profits coming back that will be spent on basic roads in Norwich, who will make the decision on how that's spent? Will it be the City Council or will it be the County Council? Because I think we'll have very different priorities.
Decisions about highways issues in the city, investment in highways issues in the city, rests entirely with the County Council following their decision to terminate the Highways Agency agreement. I'm not sensing, and obviously we're a member of the Transforming Cities Committee, but those decisions only relate to the Transforming Cities bids, these would be other schemes which would be funded, or improvements that would be funded as a consequence of any profit made on this process. I'm not aware that we have, or that there are any plans for us to have any say in that. In fact, based on recent experience, I'd be very surprised if the county were planning to consult us or involve us in that. Jo might want to say more, she might want to keep out of it, I suppose, but sadly I think that's the answer, Karen.
Jo?
If you'd like me to come back on that, I think the chances of there being a surplus in the foreseeable future, or certainly for this year, is remote. And I don't know, we might be able to get to a position with the county that we do have a bit more influence, but at the moment, I concur with Mike's view of the situation, but we're certainly not looking at making a surplus this year.
So I think the way things stand at the moment is we're, after at least 3 decades of a joint highways authority, we're now having to recalibrate our relationship, and that's an issue for the county council as well as it is for us. But we know our own patch, and the Joint Highways Authority was highly effective. We bring a lot of expertise, and we bring to it, some imaginative thinking about the city and transport and the networks and so on. So we will work very hard to build a positive relationship with our colleagues at the County Council. Mike, you wanted to come in?
Just to say that there was an independent report carried out about 2 years ago into the effectiveness of the Highways Agency Committee by and the arrangement by a highly respected one of the big consultancy firms that found it to be value for money and very effective. That report was never shared with members of the committee at county who made the decision to terminate the agreement. They were kept unaware of that. Which is a great shame. And the other sad thing is, we do have expertise here, and one of the reasons the Highways Agency Committee was first set up, as I understand it, is because of disagreements between city and county over highways issues in the city, which had on occasions led to litigation. Of course, the only people who benefit from public bodies litigating against one another are the lawyers. No one else benefits, and that's why the Highways Agency Agreement and the committee were set up, so that we could work together, have joint plans and implement them jointly. And I think it's very sad that we've lost that, because we're going to have to watch very carefully. We want to work closely in partnership and be constructive, obviously with the county council on this, but we're going to have to watch very carefully what they do in the city, because we do know that there are members of the county council who want to roll back some of the major improvements that we've seen in the city, and if that seems to be likely, then we're going to be opposing that, and I think that would be a very sad day.
Yeah, one looks to positive engagement, and certainly I think the reason we got Transforming Cities funding or access to it at that particular point in time was because we had remarkably strong joint working, not just through the Joint Highways Authority, but through the Greater Norwich Growth Partnership. And we were one city at that time, which was not a unitary or metropolitan authority, but a major city district. So we move on. Right, we do need to move on actually, but I'm going to ask Sandra if you've got anything you'd like to add.
Yes, I've got a quick question. As far as I'm aware, the Parking Joint Committee lacks provision for members of the public to ask questions. So will the portfolio holder for sustainable and inclusive growth, who I believe has a seat on this committee, ask the County Council to create a slot for members of the public to table questions as a means of increasing democracy and accountability?
Mike, yes?
Sorry, Sandra, you said the parking partnership. Did you mean the Transforming Cities Committee?
No, the Norfolk Parking Partnership, the joint committee that the report is talking about.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm more than happy to raise that and ask the question.
Yeah, Joe's got a hand up. Joe?
What I wanted to say was that we're talking about renegotiating the Norfolk Parking Partnership, and that would be the ideal opportunity to insist that something like that came as part of the new structure of the partnership.
Yeah, I'm sure we look on that sympathetically, Sandra. James, anything to add?
No, nothing to add, so thank you.
Okay, can we accept the recommendations, please? Yeah, good, excellent. Right, Constitution. So, Mike, well done. You've had a string of reports, weighty reports this evening. Give you a break and ask Paul to take the next 3 or 4. Paul, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Review. Yeah,
yes,
we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, just to go through the constitutional review, there are a number of recommendations. First of all, which deals with prosecution of offences, clarifies how the procedure, which officer can actually be involved in it, and the authority given to him. This is actually an important point. I remember, actually, this is over 30 years ago, but when I was on East Sussex County Council, a solicitor did actually successfully overcome a prosecution by the County Council, precisely because there were not definitive regulations in the council's constitution. So we've actually made sure that that won't happen here in Norwich. The other recommendation with regards to gifts and hospitality given to councillors, obviously any gift of more than £25 has to be reported. I station to say this will mean that none of my presents from my children for my birthday or my Christmas will ever be declared, because there's always going to be a lot less than £25, but never mind. So I would recommend approval.
Yeah, okay, and this was the cross-party constitution working party agreed these recommendations. Any cabinet members? No. Any officer comment at all? Anton, Rachel?
Hi, I think really just to say, yeah, it is there as a guide for members. It's to protect you and to protect the council capacity as members, not in your private capacity. Any concerns, please just come and speak to me or to Democratic Services.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the work you did on this. Right, any other cabinet members? Sandra, anything you want to add? You okay with this? James? No, okay, so we can accept the recommendations. This goes forward, obviously, to full council. Right, irrecoverable national non-domestic rates. Paul.
Yes, this again is a regular item that comes before us. This is basically to write off as unrecoverable debt a couple of issues where there have been voluntary agreements where we really cannot actually collect those monies anymore. So it's a technical accounting measure, but it's one that we have to go through.
Any comments from anybody? James, Sandra, you okay with this? It's an exhaustive process to bring it to this point, actually.
Oh yes, we do all that we possibly can to recover as much money as we can from domestic governments.
Okay, can we?
Can I just say, Chair, I was disappointed that Councillor Kendrick didn't say that. Of course, although we're writing it off now, if an opportunity ever arises again, we will collect it, which is what you often tell the committee.
Indeed, you're absolutely right. I should have said that. But at the end of the day, if there's an opportunity that does arise in the future, we will actually, tackle it and actually try and recover any money as we can.
Well, they may hide, but they cannot escape our ever vigilant eye. Okay. So on that basis, thank you for that addition, Councillor Wright. Can we accept the recommendations? Thank you. And let's go on to item 13, which is an IT contract renewal for multi-function devices.
This report is fairly self-explanatory. It deals with an IT contract renewal for multifunctional devices and bulk printers. I would urge approval.
Right. Any comments from anybody? Officers, members? Sandra, James? Are we happy with the recommendation? Yep. Nikki, you're happy with it?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. Thumbs up, please, if you're happy with it. Okay, let's move on to item 14, another IT contract renewal, civil enforcement solutions. Again,
very self-explanatory. This is obviously an IT contract renewal for the civil enforcement. It's approximately about £220,000 over a 4-year period. So I very much urge approval.
Okay, any officer comments? Member comments? We all okay? Yeah, thumbs up, excellent. Thank you, and accept the recommendations. So, Paul, well done. And now it's Gail's turn. So Gail, item 15, neighbourhood services.
Thank you. So we're talking about award of contract for concrete repairs to stairs and communal walkways at St Leonards Road, Providence Place, Orchard Street, Lothian Street, Goldwell Road, Victoria Street and Gilman Road. So this is another proposal which shows this council's commitment to ensuring that our housing stock remains in a good state of repair and that our tenants have good quality homes to live in. The work involves 66 flats situated in blocks across the city, significant investment of approximately 500,000, and this funding has been included in the HRA capital programme for 2020-21. The contract includes repairs to concrete communal walkways and concrete repairs to stairs, deck membrane works to stairs and landings, new balcony railings to landings and stairs to some locations, and localised brickwork repairs. Benefits include the deck membranes protecting the structural elements from water ingress and the safety aspects of the new railings on staircases for tenants. There are warranties for the work as specified in paragraph 5. The tender process will be progressed and applications evaluated for quality and cost. Suppliers are aware that they will have to undertake work whilst complying with the current COVID-19 government guidelines. And I should also point out at this stage that the works are subject to leaseholder consultation. So at this stage, I'm asking you to agree the recommendation to delegate the authority to award the contract for structural repairs to the Director of People and Neighbourhoods in consultation with the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Social Housing.
Thank you very much, Gail. Neil, did you have anything to add?
Nothing to add to that, Leader. That's a very accurate summary, Councillor Harris.
As they always are. So thank you very much. Okay, anybody got any questions on this? Yeah, Sandra?
Thank you, Ellen. I've got a question that kind of overarches the coming items that address the issuing of various contracts or the delegation of it. I'd like to understand how, when the council issues these contracts, it can ensure that residents receive value for money, not only on paper, but then when the repairs are actually delivered. So what protocol is the council following with regards to checking the work after it has been completed?
Okay, who would like to pick that up on the officer side?
I'm happy to do that. If
yes, please, Neil.
Yeah, okay, I can speak to Councillor Bogine on that one. We carry out rigorous on-site regular inspections of the works. We're on site probably 2-3 times a week with the contractors. There is a sign-off period. There are various tests that take place during the works to ensure that the works are going in correctly. Also, the warranties are warranties covering workmanship and materials. And so with regard to the concrete repairs, there's a 10-year warranty on workmanship and materials. With the membranes, which are the overlaying slip-resistant decks, there's a 15-year warranty. Workmanship and materials again, and so we get certificates from the contractors, from the specialists, and they are bound to come back if issues and problems develop and rectify them.
Okay. Right, any further points on that? Thank you for asking the question, Councillor Berglin. Can we agree item 15? Yeah, for the delegation, and something similar for item 16. Gail.
Thank you, Alan. So as you were saying, a similar scenario as the previous report. This time the report involves a contract for concrete repairs to stairs and communal walkways at Kensington Place. I must be careful not to say Kensington Palace. Oxford Street, Wessex Street, Cranworth Gardens and Percival Close. Once again, the contract shows this council's commitment to keeping our stock in a good state of repair so that our tenants have good quality homes that they're proud to live in. A total of 86 flats will benefit from the repairs located across the city. The contract, amongst other things, includes repairs to concrete communal walkways and private balconies, concrete repairs to stairs, deck membrane works to stairs, communal landings and balcony landings, new balcony railings to landings, and localised brickwork repairs. These works will, of course, extend the life expectancy of the structural elements, and warranties are as specified in paragraph 4 on page 265. Another significant investment in our stock, this time involving 6 medium-rise blocks of flats at an estimated cost of 600,000. This funding has been included in the HRA capital programme for 2020-21. And as with the previous report, we are not at the stage to award the contract as the tender process is ongoing, to be followed by the evaluation based on cost and quality. At this stage, again, the suppliers are aware that the work they will undertake will have to comply with the current COVID-19 government guidelines, again, subject to leaseholder consultation. So back to the recommendation to delegate authority to award the contract for structural repairs to the Director of People and Neighbourhoods in consultation with the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Social Housing. Thank you.
Okay. Is anybody else, any other officer want to make any comments at all? Yes, Paul.
Just picking up on the previous councillor question about value for money and quality, we will of course hold retention payments to the contractor if we're not satisfied as part of our contract administration to ensure that we do get that quality and value for money for the city.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's a very helpful comment. Okay, can we accept the recommendations on item 16? Are we okay to do that? Yep, okay, thank you. Let's go on to item 17, which is contracts for whole home improvements. Gail.
Thank you. So each year a number of properties are returned to the council which need a substantial amount of work undertaken before they meet the Norwich void standard. A whole home improvement can involve major works to the kitchen, bathroom, electrical rewiring, replastering, heating, insulation and upgrade, and renewal of internal carpentry and redecoration. Significant amount of work. It's really important that this work is undertaken in a timely and efficient manner so that these much needed homes can have new tenants move in and so that the council receives a rental income from the properties. Already an interim award has been made under delegated powers for a sum of £166,943.99 to urgently undertake whole house improvements to 6 properties. We know of 4 more properties that will need to have extensive work undertaken, and based on previous years' experiences, we would anticipate about a further 10 properties will also need this sort of work. The estimated value to refurbish 20 properties is £556,479.98, with the interim award of £166,943.99 having been made, leaving a figure of £389,535.99 for the further 14 properties. The work really will have a very positive impact on the health and well-being of the new tenants, whilst improved insulation and more modern and efficient heating systems will reduce the carbon footprint and help to reduce fuel poverty. Details of the procurement process can be found in paragraphs 7 to 10 on page 273 to 274. So the recommendation is to award contracts for whole home improvements for the complete refurbishment of 20 various properties within the housing portfolio to Foster Properties Maintenance Limited and Brer Group Limited.
Thank you, Gail. John, anything to add?
No, as always, Councillor Harris has covered it particularly well.
Thanks, John. Any questions from anybody? We all okay? Right, can we agree the recommendations? Right, thank you very much. And the last above the line report, this is a contract for Canterbury Place and its internal heating upgrades. Gail.
Thank you. The council owns and manages a district heating scheme serving dwellings at Canterbury Place, Ely Street, Lothian Street and Orchard Street. The heating scheme was installed in the mid-70s, serving 134 dwellings in total, with 38 of these being leased dwellings. This proposal is to refresh the internal heating systems serving the 96 council-operated dwellings. This is due to the age and obsolescence and condition of some of the equipment. The scope of the work is detailed in paragraphs 3 to 6. A well-insulated, controllable system will be more efficient with lower CO2 emissions. These works will also ensure a reliable and serviceable system for the next 20 years, something that I'm sure the residents will appreciate. A mini tender exercise has been conducted by Eastern Procurement Limited using the existing heating installation framework. This is clearly explained in paragraphs 8 to 14 on pages 280 and 81. The tender submitted by Gasways Services Limited was successful, so moving to the recommendation to award the contract to deliver new internal heating systems to 96 dwellings to Gasways Services Limited for the sum of £348,344.64. Again, another considerable investment to our housing stock.
Thank you very much, Gail. Neil, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments, questions from elected members? No? Okay, can we accept the recommendation? Okay, we now move to item 19, which is the exclusion of the public, and we need to consider that exclusion. It refers to exempt items, which are of a confidential nature. Very careful balance is made as to whether they should be exempt from the public part of the meeting. As you'll notice, we've had 18 items above the line, and there is a small number of items below the line. Can I just ask Cabinet colleagues if they are happy for those items to be exempt? Yes, okay, thank you. So what will happen now is we will need to leave this particular Zoom meeting, because on the email that you would have received from Stuart Guthrie, there are two Zooming codes. Everyone's used this one, obviously, but there is a second one which will bring us in for the final items of the meeting. Now, it's going to take a few minutes, I think, for Democratic Services just to sort that out. So I think probably a 5-minute break, and then find that Zoom in number and log in again, and we can then finish the meeting in a timely way. Okay, see you all in a few minutes. Can I also thank members of the public who have stuck with us through the last 2 hours and 20 minutes, and thank them for their attendance and engagement in this very important meeting. Thanks very much.